You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Has anyone ever asked you what you're reading lately and you don't have a book to talk about? Well, you're not alone. You're part of a trend that's playing out across the country, in fact. Americans are reading less for pleasure these days, according to research from the University of Florida and University College London. And it's not a little dip. We are talking a 40% drop in daily leisure reading for people 15 and older over the past 2 decades. This shift is especially prevalent for specific groups like Black Americans, people with lower incomes, and people in rural areas. The authors of the study don't have definitive reasons as to why this is happening, but they suggest a couple of things that could be at play, like our shrinking leisure time and, you guessed it, the rise of digital media. For more on these findings, Dr. Jill Sonke is here. She's co-director of the EpiArts lab at the University of Florida, and she co-authored this study about the decline in reading for pleasure, which came out earlier this year. Dr. Sonke, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you, Libby. I'm delighted to talk with you.
So what made you want to dig into how much time people are spending reading for pleasure these days?
In the EpiArts lab, we study relationships between arts participation of all sorts and health outcomes of all sorts. So for us, when we think about the health benefits of arts participation and what those activities are, reading for pleasure seems like one of the low-hanging fruits. It's reading for pleasure is something lots of different people like to do. Among different forms of the arts, reading has tended to be fairly accessible. So we were very interested in, with the changes happening in our society today, how much people are reading for pleasure. And we've seen in other research documented declines. And so we were interested in bringing our more advanced statistical models to bear in understanding that relationship today.
Tell me a little bit about how the study worked. How many people were involved? What was the methodology?
We used the American Time Use Study, which is a longitudinal large cohort data set. So we were able to look at data from over 236,000 Americans who completed this survey between 2003 and 2023. And one of the great things about this particular survey in relation to what we know about reading for pleasure is that people complete the survey and give very detailed information about one single day. And so it reduces memory bias. Often these surveys ask people, how much have you read in the past year? And, our memories just aren't that great. And so those surveys tend to be a little less reliable, and this, we feel, may be more reliable data.
I mentioned at the top of this segment that you found a 40% drop in daily leisure reading over the last 20 years. Did anything surprise you about these findings, or do you want to highlight any other findings that really stuck out to you about how people relate to reading these days?
Yeah, personally, the one finding that really surprised me and concerned me a lot was how little people are reading with children. So in this sample of over 236,000 people, 21% had children at home under the age of 9, but only 2% of the sample reported reading with children. And that statistic actually didn't change much over the 20-year period. But it's just so low. And when we think about the benefits of reading with children, it's especially concerning. We know that reading with children is related to reading readiness and reading attainment. We know it's also linked to educational readiness and attainment and education across the lifespan. I also, in my personal experience of reading with my children, know that it's so important for bonding and for stimulating the imagination and creativity. So that was one piece that really got my attention in this study.
I mentioned you don't have definitive data about why this is happening. Why are people reading less for pleasure? We can all make guesses. Did you, by looking at the data sets, make any of your own educated guesses, again, not definitive, about what's going on here?
Yeah, this follows on research that has shown declines in reading over the past 70 or 80 years. We know when television came into our homes, people started reading less. So this is a long, slow decline that we've seen. And so for me, it's logical that the increase in our engagement with digital media, with social media, is likely a factor here. We need more research around that. There's just more competition for our attention right now, and the ways in which we're engaging with information is changing. So there are a lot of potential variables that we really do need to look at.
This just looked at books. Am I correct? If somebody is reading a fan fiction online, would it have been captured in the study?
This was not just looking at books, actually. Reading for pleasure in this survey included reading on Kindles, electronic devices. It also included reading the newspaper for pleasure. So it's not just books and it's not just forms of reading like fiction. It did include reading the newspaper for pleasure and reading other forms of media.
Wow. So we're talking about these surprising findings. We should also talk about why this is important. You've called some of these findings concerning. We talked a little bit about the reading with children, and although that didn't really change, it is a shockingly low number of people with small kids at home who are reading with their children. What do you think is lost here when fewer people are reading for pleasure?
So I think that reading for pleasure, like other forms of arts engagement, is a means for enhancing our health and our well-being. So we know that there are associations between reading for pleasure and mental health and empathy, well-being. Reading for pleasure is a form of relaxation and stress reduction. So it really is, one of those low-hanging fruits for moderating the stress that we're all faced with every day. Reading for pleasure is also a really important way of stimulating our creativity, our imagination, developing patterns of lifelong learning. Reading is a window into other worlds and cultures and experiences. So there's so many benefits to reading, social benefits, personal benefits, and I think important benefits to our well-being.
Do you think it's possible to reverse this trend, Dr. Sonke?
That is such a good question. Um, I think anything is possible, and I see us collectively adopting new interests and new habits and new patterns all the time. In the 1980s, we all came on board with exercise as a health behavior, whereas in the 1950s, that was not a collective health behavior. So I do think anything is possible. I am very biased because I research the health benefits of the arts, but I see more evidence that people are understanding the relationship between the arts and health. And I do think it's possible that we can come to appreciate the value of reading for pleasure if we can make that link between reading and our health.
So we need like the Suzanne Summers of reading, maybe.
That would be great. Yes.
Applications open. Professor Jill Sonke is co-director of the EpiArts Lab at the University of Florida. She's also the co-author of a study about declining rates of Americans reading for pleasure. Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby.
So that's what the national picture looks like. But what are reading trends looking like in our corner of the U.S., the Pacific Northwest? We reached out to Brooke Bosley to find out. She's the co-founder of the Black Futures Book Club, which is a group that meets monthly at the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute in Seattle.
We read Black books each month from a Black, queer, sometimes Indigenous writer who's written about the speculative future. So the writings tend to be Afrofuturism. We've dipped into some Black horror recently. And then we do everything from like across the diaspora as well.
I wanted to speak with Brooke because of that finding in the study that specific groups like Black Americans saw bigger declines in leisure reading. Brooke said the book club is mostly for Black people who identify as queer, non-binary, and everything in between. They also welcome people who are not Black, who are respectful of the goals of the club. She said the Black Futures Book Club has been a way for members to forge community and build relationships, and of course, it helps people keep up with the habit of reading. Beyond the club, Brooke has always had a pretty special relationship to books.
So my grandmother was a school librarian for 30 plus years. And so growing up, like we would go to the library with her, like, and that right there has a connection to her. And my mom like would also do the same thing. Like we would go to the library regularly. I will never forget like a day that like we weren't at the library. Like we were there weekly. We were getting books and stuff. So for me personally, it's like a connection to family.
Clubs like Brooke's create community spaces where reading is at the center. It's how people connect. It's not just a chore to do. Another place for readers to find community? Third Place Books. If you don't know Third Place, it's a local chain of bookshops around Seattle that started in 1998. Spencer Ruchti is the company's author events manager, which means he meets a ton of readers every year. We dialed him up for an inside perspective on how frequently and what people in Seattle are reading. Hi, Spencer. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Libby. I'm very happy to be on the show.
So we're talking about this study that found that people are now reading less for pleasure these days. Are you seeing that trend showing up in your business here in Seattle?
So I first just want to acknowledge that, consumer behavior is in buying books, that is a completely different metric than reading for pleasure. But there are a few external metrics that we can look at in Seattle for, I think, understanding this survey. First is a healthy economy around books, both as an educational resource and as a hobby. Second, I think the number of literary institutions that a city can support. And third is live attendance for events, readings, book discussions, which are, undoubtedly a huge part of Seattle's ecosystem here. I often tell people that Seattle is one of the best cities in the world to be a reader. We have at least 40 new and used bookstores in the metro area. We have two massive library systems, the Seattle Public Library and King County Library. Seattle has been a UNESCO City of Literature since 2017. There are just so many ample ways to engage with books in Seattle, more so than most cities in the United States.
How about the type of reader who comes in to get books at Third Place? Has that shifted over the years? Like, have you noticed any differences in the people who are coming in to read?
Absolutely. I think now more than ever, we see, especially for author events for romance authors, romantasy authors, science fiction and fantasy authors, we see more people than ever coming into the store and saying, I haven't read a book in, years. The author, you have now pulled me into a world of reading for pleasure that I didn't know before. That is in large part due to readers online, on Instagram, on TikTok. This is a story that's been covered many times over, but we're seeing a lot of our most passionate readers come from the internet, essentially, come from social media, and they're coming to our store in droves, and it's really wonderful to see.
It sounds like there's suddenly this huge interest in fantasy and romantasy. Do you have any sense of why those genres have just blown up recently? Do you think it's the internet and the way people are talking about them online? There are these like really robust fan communities around those genres. Or what do you think is behind that?
I think it's the passionate way that people talk about these books online. If it wasn't romantasy, it would be something else. We see trends in shifting genres all the time. If it's not vampire books, then it's books with dragons in them. This is something that's constantly changing, and we're typically second to know whenever these changes happen, because we're actually responding to what readers are responding to online. You have this kind of crazy trends lately where you have authors who are publishing genre work first online as fan fiction, and then publishers are seeing the built-in audience for these books, and the guaranteed sales, essentially. And they're coming to these authors and offering them book deals. And then these books are packaged in a traditional way, sold in hardcover often with those beautiful sprayed edges that you see in bookstores these days. And then, I have to say that one of our highest grossing events this year is with an author named Senlin Yu, who has never published a book before, has only published online. And she's publishing a book that is adapted Harry Potter fan fiction, that was originally published as adapted Harry Potter fan fiction. And we sold out of 800 tickets, all of which came with books in under 2 weeks. That is unheard of for someone who is technically a debut author. So these trends are absolutely bringing readers to our stores.
What do you think it would take to turn this trend around and get people to read more? Is it having more third spaces? Is it having different kinds of genres, different types of books, more availability? Like, what do you see as sort of the solve or the way to get people to maybe open a book a little bit more?
One thing I think we can do, which I think is already happening as I, say this, is we can make reading cool. We can, that means reading in public places. It means, talking to your friends about reading and what you're reading. It means attending public events. I'm a huge proponent of going out to the community and talking about literature. One of my goals as a bookseller is I never want to hear again someone say to me, I haven't read a book in years, and I don't plan to, as if it's kind of, as if it's this, we don't say that necessarily about math. We don't say this about other subjects, but for some reason, people take a pride in not reading or not reading novels. And I just think that's a shame. I think people should be. I think reading is really important to the intellectual complexity of our culture, and I think that should be something we put on display.
Are there any conversations happening at Third Place, or have there been conversations about trying to get people to read more? And if so, what do those look like? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, one thing that we've actually just started this year, which was a partnership with Seattle Arts and Lectures, the Seattle Public Library, and King County Library System, is we hosted our first public silent reading party, which was down at the Seattle Center. We had 250 people show up, and we expect in future years that there will be, more and more people attending this event. And it wasn't about, selling books. We had a few books for sale, but largely it was for decoration, to be quite honest. But it was sheerly an event about the public act of reading and being together with people who you don't know and reading beside them. And it was, people were listening to audiobooks. People were reading on their Kindles. People were, of course, reading physical books. People, approached literature in whatever way was most comfortable to them, and just spent, 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon reading. And it was, one of the most beautiful things I think I saw all year.
Spencer, from your perspective, why is reading for pleasure important? And do you have any anecdote or a time in your life when reading for pleasure was really relevant and important to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've read for pleasure all my life. It is I go to books when I need silent time, when I need peace and meditation. I can feel like if I haven't read for a few days, I can feel that angst building up inside me, and it's like a pressure that needs to be released. And it is in reading for pleasure and reading frequently and being able to, especially now when we are just bombarded by, chatbots and large language models that are trying to produce human, text on our behalf. It's so important to continue to engage with text in depth, or engage with narrative, and understand narrative and be familiar with narrative, because that's what, narrative makes up our politics. It makes up our policy choices. A good storyteller, it can be a lifesaver, but it can also, a good storyteller can also control the narrative and be an autocrat. So it's important for people to to read and engage with literature because it's one of the only mediums we have where someone can, someone can have a complete and full thought in 400 to 500 pages. We don't necessarily get that with podcasts. We certainly don't get it with social media. It's all about long, sustained engagement and thought for me.
That's Spencer Ruchti with Third Place Books. You're listening to Soundside, and I'd love to hear how your reading habits have changed over the years and why. You can leave us a voicemail at 206-221-3213 or email us at soundside@kuow.org. Reading for pleasure declining by 40% over the last 20 years. That is a remarkable statistic. So I want to know, is that happening in your life? What's getting in the way or replacing books or newspapers in your free time? Give us a call, 206-221-3213, soundside@kuow.org. Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at kuow.org.